Hey, what's up? I just want to tap in with an idea for some content that was on my mind. I had a few different things that was on my mind, so I got to think about where I'm going to start. But I wanted to say one is that I think I made another video where I was talking about in the modern paradigm, like the digital reality. I said that for technically, so long as we've been resembled ourselves, like that is resembled humans, but primates, and been standing, so long as we've been standing upright or even just having feet and hands, we've been in a digital space since then, because the digits and what are done with mathematical operations are what are done with mathematical operations, both with the modern technology, but then also within the last few thousands of years, what has been done mathematically in Western societies is based on the reasoning of mathematics based on our 10 digits, according to Algebra for Dummies by Mark Zigarelli, an older iteration of that. And that's what's employed there, something called the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, from, roughly speaking, and largely the Middle East slash parts of Asia, Southern Europe, and Africa, which a lot of that can be appreciated as Asia. In the older text, I understand that's all considered Asia properly in the older text, but now we would call that Africa and Europe. I think the proper word for Europe is Europa, and then Asia in the Middle East. But so that's digital then with the mathematics. But then before that, anything we've just done in life with our hands and also while standing on our feet is digital, because those are our digits. The phalanges of the feet and the hands. The hands are called the carpals, and the feet are called the tarsals. But the further extended the appendages of that, the further extension of that are called phalanges, I think, both for feet and hands, and there's 10 of them for human beings, and our mathematical reasoning is based upon 10 like that. But all of our life is still digital like that, and had been. But and it's actually profound that it's digital, not only with the technology, but what we can do with our hand, what we can do for standing on our feet, how that would affect the blood as it sits in our body. According to Osho, there's different mental operations and things that can be fathomed by the dynamics of blood flow that are affected by standing on 2 feet. And then according to Osho, and then what we do with our hands as in manipulating objects, specifically in the skill that would amount to, and how formidable we can be with the skill of our hand, but also of our mind for standing on feet. That's all digital, and it's actually profound. As anything as profound as you would appreciate the digital space now, all that we do based on our digits is actually as profound and had always been, and it makes us unique among nature, according to some lines of thought, in that we are properly thinkers, that is creators of thought, and anything that would come from that, according to Arthur Avalon. And that's what's referred to with the word man. I think that word man is derived from India. It might come from like Saktiman, which Sakti is like the feminine, active, kinetic life force, and then man would be like the static component, the possessor of that, as in the possessing of a woman, or of just of the life force, as a man, as he is viable in activated, is balanced but also potent for the possession of Sakti. And so that's in Sakti man. But I don't mean to be appropriating other cultures, but that's what I picked up studying Arthur Avalon, is that that word man, it may come from India. A lot of our words in English are borrowed and appropriated, and one would be man, and also from Sanskrit, and man would be one. But in the modern sense, there's a lot of there can be redundancy in terms of compatibility. That may have always been the case with human beings, but especially in the modern digital phase, is that you have ostensibly a lot of access to opportunity in learning and choice on the surface, but there can also be a lot of compatibility difficulty that plays into that. One that may be overlooked is class. Ideas about class, that is access to opportunities that amount to privilege and entitlement, but that's actually accepted as a value in itself in most iterations of society, including the modern Western, which is that the modern Western society is ostensibly meritocratic, is that it focuses on merit as a value in itself, but also to substantiate privilege. but then once merit is honored, recognized, activated, and then maybe bolstered by the support that would come with that, once it's recognized, it amounts to class and deference and designation and differentiation and stratification of privilege, no less than opportunities for life and health, but also enjoyment of life, such as the mitigating and the sharing and the denying of privilege, but also duty. So I appreciate that. When I went to college, the first time I really experienced that was that I went to college. I went away to college, and I was in a dorm room. But that dorm room had people that would clean it. Like it had a bathroom, but there would be like a cleaning staff. And I wasn't used to having someone clean up after me, like a nanny. And so that it's a little bit different in the modern society where the person they're working for an institution, and they're compensated by that institution. You are also compensating that institution with what means you have, and maybe you had paid for that, and likely will pay for that as you're being fettered with debt. But in that moment, you're being catered to, and have actually being looked up after like a nanny. That'd be a unique experience for a person from a different background, like especially me. But that, what's up? But that's good to see you.
You too.
But that's actually that goes towards the point, is that in the modern iteration you have a lot of ambivalence about what is class, what gives the standpoint of class, what it is to mean to have and operate with class and express class and be respected for that or the lack thereof. It can be ambivalent, but it's also interchangeable a little bit in the, especially in the American society, would be a case in point. A lot of the digital reality in the world over has been influenced by the dynamics of American society, but also it reflects some of the dynamics of American society and the pretensions, but also the reality of just having more malleable class structure, such as to be redeeming and enlightening is that you're not born into or stuck into one class. That can be true, but also maybe idealistic. But then also just the understanding of class is greatly confounded in the United States, especially in the digital space, such as to make, sometimes there can be redundancies and conflict and ambivalence, and also failures like in communication or just opportunity. A lot of things actually break down when there's, so things break down with misunderstanding, but communication is challenged by class. By implications of class. If you've thought about like all the different times people have gotten into fights at bars in life, a lot of the really sad, tragic atrocities that we have and have not heard of, a lot of it might have to do with a failure to understand class, an effort to create class, and also like duties and what's expected of people, both between men and men, between men and women, between women and women, between women and men, between young and young, young and old, old and young, old and old, and any iteration of that, educated, not educated, whatnot. Some of the ambivalence about what it is to be what it is to have dignity in the first place, what it is to be human, but also to have class. The United States is founded upon and predicated upon dehumanizing other people, such as to garner their actual labor and resources and value and health. That's American society. And I said in this video that you can appreciate that human beings going back had likely been cannibalistic, as in cannibalizing others' stature first, and then their actual physical body and or resources, or standing upon a land and what that would amount to, their access to resources. That can be appreciated exactly by assailing someone's stature, that is dehumanizing someone. So that's what America is. That's what America has been built on and never stopped being that, such as colonialism has been upon America. But it also, America exports culture, according to Dr. Umar Johnson, as a chief commodity, and that had been the case long. So you could say that maybe a lot of the world is affected by some of America's dehumanizing of other people. My father told me that one thing that's very unique about America is that it not only has a little bit of a lack or dearth of so what is American culture? Some people may say Americana stuff. Some people might say like rock and roll stuff like that. But what is really authentically American culture that you can point out similar that you could other cultures abroad, that like really American, that's unique about American, such as like your dancing of the Zulus, your singing of the Zulu, some of your traditions of Latin America, your understanding around herbs of Latin America, even your traditions of Europe, your real ethnic ethnic brilliance and value, but also distinctions of the world over. What has America to offer of that? I don't say America has nothing, especially as foundational Black Americans have to say about that. But America, as the status quo goes, is a little bit of a lack of culture. It's an anti-culture. That is, it exactly breaks down, confounds, insults, diminishes, eviscerates culture to land here. So, yeah, like when I had an ethnic name in my life that stems from my father's people. Very few or seldom people would be interested in pronouncing my name correctly, learning it, practicing it, pronouncing it upon meeting me. Very few people, much less call me by my given name, an ethnic name. That's an example. There's actually an anti-culture of America that is to exactly break down and humiliate anything. America is very xenophobic in that sense. Not only for people of African descent, but also of European descent. To my father's taste, is that America is somewhat exactly breaks down and humbles anyone to arrive here. Where actually, like different times, if I'm in like a venue, and it comes, I have some Irish heritage. I have German heritage, but also Irish heritage, more so of Irish. If I were to mention anything about my Irish heritage publicly in America, between in front of European Americans, but also sometimes African Americans, there's an exact instinct to deride Irish culture, and then especially a person of color resonating with their Irish culture. And any time in life that I've ever made a statement that I would lean into or speak from testimony of my European heritage and or my combination of European and African heritage, but especially referencing and leaning into European and or combination of European and African, I will not be tolerated for that in the United States, and that will be a problem. That will be they say foul pass. That'll be a scene right there. If I speak about being of a biracial heritage as a strong suit, or just as testimony, I will not be tolerated by that by white Americans, mixed race Americans, and or African Americans by and large, but also especially particularly Irish. So there's actually so what would be so there's a history about deriding Irish culture in the Americas, but is there not also the same history about deriding almost all other European cultures in the Americas, German included at times, British included at times, such as even going to war with the British, Scandinavian. There's really almost no culture in the American, European or otherwise, that is actually tolerated and really just simple. So the best respect is simple respect. There's no culture, European or otherwise, simply respected or tolerated in the American society. The dollar is what goes in the American society. So there is nothing of tolerance in the Americas for a culture. It may be celebrated by and large, but America is what America is about. But what is America about? So, but part of that is that, and then part of the way that functioned, and that's part of the economic history, and there's profit to be made by that. Because when you dismiss another person or strip them of their connection to their culture or their understanding of themselves, you exactly disempower them like that. But also you can confiscate their potential and also their value by having them doubt themselves, because you're not as formidable or effective as you doubt yourself. So a lot of America is exactly about deriding other cultures but then also to derive profit from that. But you can't exactly get outside of considerations of class as human beings, because human beings, we stratify, we form hierarchies, and that is exactly mitigated and expressed and enjoyed and suffered upon notions of class. And that those notions, they can be anthropomorphic, as in what is it to be a man, and this is a man, and this is what's expected of a man. But they also get idealistic in that this man is better than that man, because if we are man, how may one man be a man and be better than another man that is also a man? That's exactly a contradiction and a confounding. That's an actual faulty ideal. You could probably reason that perfectly, but even perfect is a faulty ideal as perfect. But we had been men and are still men like that. Man, women, and child is still mankind like that. But there's an ambivalence about class, and it can be difficult that's some of what there's a difficulty in compatibility in a digital space, both between like means of technology means of accessing technology, means of expression through technology, means of garnering resource and income to procure technology. But then existing within all that, class is imminent and is largely a problem. But a lot of people, my father would say, Americans don't know what class is, and I would say that a lot of people that would be not American would exactly say that Americans don't know what class is. That is, they don't have some of the your refined and your long standing implications and habits and etiquette around class as other cultures do the world over. But the exception proves the rule. So I would say the foundational Black American experience would be different and unique among that, and maybe class par excellence, in culture par excellence. That is culture that is battle tested, class that is battle tested, humanity, faith, religion that is battle tested and proven and redemptive within that is my experience of foundational Black American culture. But still, American culture by and large, and as what is wicked is corrupting. So some of the by and large American culture can corrupt even parts of foundational Black American culture, I think, if we're not conscious. But just that there's ambivalence about class. But then you could also say that part of America casting off class, actually there's some redemption in that too, in that you can make something of yourself, and some people will respect you if you have a skill that you can demonstrate and you can get by with that, and you can have success and favor and outcomes that you couldn't have in some of your other iterations of human experience, even those with which you might say it would be like eloquent class, or like there's a dark and a light to anything. And even were you to delineate, define class clearly so that it's not redundant and you don't have conflict, there could be heinous atrocity and suffering with that. Were you to cast out class and like in America and make it purely upon merit, there can be redeeming blessings with that, but then also some ambivalence that amounts to conflict and therefore suffering. So I'm not saying America is better or worse than anything, but I'm just saying that the modern digital space, the world over, has been affected and also somewhat initiated by American culture and contributions, though not entirely. But some of that is also contributing some of the ambivalence around class. So, like, for example, in America, and this is a little bit of like, this is what I think might be valuable to a young person or someone watching this, is that a lot of times in American society, on the surface, they throw out class, and we're appreciated as all equal. So you had these different teachers in school. They didn't exactly express to you their real notions and pretensions and airs about class. They would likely understand themselves to be class, lower middle income or lower middle class, but still class. They appreciate themselves as educated and somewhat stratified, dignified beyond that of maybe a person without a job or some of the actual constituents that they'd be serving as teachers. Likely they would have pretensions about that, airs about that, or something of not mixing or jiving with some of the actual demographics, cohorts that they serve. Your teachers would have that if they express themselves candidly, likely. But you see them your whole life, and they at least they talk to you directly. So they don't say, a teacher never came to you in school saying, you may not look me in the eye, you may not talk to me unless you're spoken to first. Some people may have had that experience, heaven forbid, but by and large, modern times, that's not the overwhelming sensation of teachers in school. You're somewhat comfortable with them, but they're actually still carrying on these notions. So you go up your whole life being comfortable around authority figures, being open in front of authority figures, showing your work in math, writing research papers to them. No one's going to read that but them. So you're comfortable expressing yourself to them, who don't necessarily have your best interests or are not operating with a sense of parity with you, your teachers like that. But then you get to working. So you get to working, and or you get around medical professionals and or any other person with authority and the ability to make decisions or statements that can impact you, your happiness, and your health. And they're having some of those same attitudes, if not worse. And also they're being compensated by professions that injure groups of people by and large as a broader motion, whether that be medicine, education, a lot of different lines of employment. The actual nature of how they garner profit, it somewhat disenfranchises and exactly injures different people, such as we are in a zero-sum contest for life and resource and finance in this iteration. So someone would have to foot the bill. If someone's profiting, someone would have to fit the bill. That is, someone would have to lose. So these different things injure people. However they understand themselves to do that or not, for intensive purposes and intents, they injure people. But you're this comfortable expressing yourself. So what I meant to say is that a lot of times in the modern iteration, and I had this experience today, someone may ask you a candid question, an honest question, a simple question, a forthright question. Someone in a position of authority, as they understand themselves and can also impact a person that they're engaging with, they engage you like that. You're used to being engaged like that, and sometimes engaging back like that your life over, especially your formative experiences in school with people that would appear similar but also have very similar values to who you're potentially being employed by or served by in a profession or legal situation, what have you. They were having the same attitudes as these people you'd soon be mixed up against. They were training you for these people you'd soon be mixed up against, with their understanding of training and value. So you have their value system operating, and also comfort with them. But you also have your identity as a potentially marginalized or marginalizable person engaging these people. So they asked you an honest question. You opened up honestly, and they were actually judging you. As soon as you opened your mouth, they were judging you. They were actually judging you before they met you and asked you the question, but they were judging you. So they asked you an honest question, but they took your statement judgmentally, such as to go all the way to the point of injure you or deny you, which is also to injure you, an opportunity. But you actually didn't know how in the hell to address them, because there's actually not a clear stratification of class. So what is your class? What is your real background? What is your real education? But also, how is that understood, appreciated, and felt by someone particularly surveying you, also with an intention to maybe profit from you? And so they're actually maybe not on an equal footing with you, even as they're accepting your application, because they have everything has like an angle. Everyone in life is actually an angler. I haven't been fishing since I've been an adult, but technically everyone is an angler because everyone has an angle, by and large. But then they ask you an honest question, having an angle. You answered it honestly, maybe not having the same angle or as inequitable of an angle. You were more so trying to cooperate and to get along, and also to succeed. You wanted to succeed. You wanted to offer something. You wanted to offer something to a school, to a profession, maybe even an ignorant medical professional. You actually wanted to offer something that subconsciously you wanted to offer them something, some humanity, some enlightenment, some understanding. But that was not their standpoint, and they were judging you that whole time and using your statements as a pretext and your lack of understanding. So they're asking you an honest question, but they're actually wanting you to understand, and to understand, if you understand, that they want you to understand an exact specific etiquette in class, an understanding of your etiquette in class, which is maybe not to your real strong suit or your real background. So you may have over-answered them. You over-answered them in employment. You over-answered them at a doctor. You over-answered them in a classroom, in a school. You over-answered them with your understanding of what's appropriate for what they're asking you. And you were humane about it. You were not human about it. You were not honest. You were not intellectual. You're not enlightening. You were not intending to offer value. And they may truly not appreciate what your value is, or would be, or could be. Because they can be anyone of any stature can be as ignorant as anything, and likely are ignorant. But you were to answer honestly, and you were denied because your class wasn't appreciated. But actually, the interesting thing is that a lot of these people, so like a lot of people, that they're having finance, they're having success by and large, and there would be some in a society that is based upon money rules, money goes. You have your designated class just for having money. So you can be from any background, a white collar, blue collar, criminal, which is actually another profession. You can't exactly judge a person for being a criminal, because anything white collar or any other class can do as much damage, if not more, as a criminal class. But any background, it doesn't matter how you got the money. And you could have done an ethical, heinous thing to get the money, but you now are afforded class because you have the money. But also, having the money, it's another form of class, stratification of privilege, but it actually veers off from what it actually means and has meant to exist within and have class, the human experience over, to my understanding. So an example of that is like, so sometimes you don't actually realize when you actually went up a level. Sometimes you may have actually transcended a level by an experience, by an exposure to a person. The background what you had to do to get in proximity to a person, but also your exposure to that person, you actually somewhat changed in that moment for better or worse, but sometimes a lot of times better, and you didn't notice that. So for me, is that, and a lot of times I'm simply not appreciated engaging people. And so, but how may that be? Is that I remember when I was in, I took a online class for an eminent school. It's an eminent school, a prestigious school near about Ivy League. As music goes, it's an Ivy League of music schools in a region that's saturated with a lot of Ivy League schools. I'm referring to Boston. But the whole northern East Coast, a lot of America, but the whole northern East Coast is steeped in Ivy League land education, gentrified education. And this point, I don't mean exactly in the negative sense of gentrification. I don't know if the word gentrification is related to the word gentry, but that's what I'm more so referring to as gentry, because in the older iterations of higher education, it wasn't just about learning knowledge. That was part of it, but a lot of it was actually handing down the leadership of the society, the overseership of the society, the class, the manners, the etiquette that would make that jive well and work well, that whole apparatus of a stratified class structure. That's a lot of what education had been in the past. It wasn't just learning, but it was, and the word education might be arbitrary right there, because according to Tashreeq Bey, education more so refers to like animal husbandry and like mass like leading human beings and training for menial tasks that actually don't speak to their true potential and capacity and intellect as human beings. That's what education is, even the higher tiers of it. But erudition is a little bit different. That's like your real learning, your real creativity, your real philosophy, true art, the humanities, the deepest sense, even mathematics, the deep, the theater, the stuff that means something, the real value as the mind goes, is erudition. So that can maybe a little bit overlap with education, but education is a lot largely, I think, bastardized into social engineering and also a commercial product that is not good for its constituents. That is a means of harnessing debt, of actually accessing and tapping some of the nation's tax revenue to then disperse it to different like Ivy League and their that whole support, that whole structure, and afford some of their life but styles, but also keep some of the mass consumption propped up and buoyed up, like the buoyancy of it. You actually need to disperse some of the tax revenue to keep things going. Part of it is subsidizing and breaking off education officials, but also medical officials, where there can maybe be some redundancy and discrepancy and ambivalence about the actual pay grade of medical professionals and educational professionals juxtaposed with their who they serve. Because if you have a great discrepancy in that's also a little bit goes to say the necessity of class, and I don't mean to be that smug about that, but if you have a broad discrepancy in privilege, but also just resources, standing, class between two people, that will actually imminently become conflict at a certain point, because you can't have this person making this much and that person making that much and them getting along together, but also somewhat making each other's life viable, serving each other before it becomes a problem. Sometimes I had a job serving like children as a school bus driver, and it actually was significant, because sometimes when you're a driver, you have to do things to engage the children, enlighten them, entertain them, keep them occupied, but also like learning, because children, my father told me that from the experience of a human being being educated is that in the mind of a young person, the experience of a young person, there's not a broad difference between the nursery, the living room of their home, and the classroom that they experience. There's not a broad distinction as they're experiencing life like that. Because this is my room, this is my living room, this is my school bus, this is my teacher, this is my class, this is my friend. In the mind of a child, that's all somewhat connected, and it's part of their home. It's actually their home like that. So the school is somewhat of the home of the child, and in the home you need to be engaging, enlightening, safeguarding, reproofing, or that is correcting the child, but by and large enlightening, entertaining, teaching, that, for lack of a better word, loving is that actually, when I were to say the word love like that, That would show you some of the ambivalence between an actual a school home base that is not the actual student's family and or loved ones and or community, but actually paid professionals to rear children as children, but also to be compensated and still be strangers and be understood to be strangers and compensated. That's actually a little bit of a redundancy there, in that children need love, they are loved, they express love, they deserve love, they also demand love and are entitled love, children. And that's exactly what they get in the home, with the family, and with the community, as humans have gone. But in the modern iteration, you don't have that. As they get off transferred guardianship to a school bus driver and a school and whatnot, what they'll experience there, and that it wouldn't be appropriate for a or for a school official of any kind to appreciate or understand themselves as loving a child. I don't think. Maybe you may be able to be idealistic about that and pass it off, but by and large, you're not understood or to understand yourself to be loving a child. That's actually significant, because then what? So what that shows you is that that you put money in there, that you put the interest of money, money will corrupt anything. Money will corrupt love, relationships, marriage, rearing of children, as you put them in a school system that is propped up, substantiated, subsidized by money, by cash money, because there'd have to be dynamics and implications based on those dynamics, based that it's being subsidized with cash money and is providing cash money to a community and also officials and staff. That there's something corrupting about that, as it, because it exactly interferes right there. So where are children interfered with? They're interfered when they're reared by people who may not love them and may not be understand themselves to love them by mandate, but also must care for them by mandate, by being compensated. I just wanted to point out that's exactly a little bit ambivalence, and so that these school officials are being paid, but the children are not being paid. But the children are also making you able to get paid, and they're actually providing labor. They're actually providing intellectual. Their children are going to work when they go to school. They pass it off as though they're being given a future. They're being prepared for a future, but they also are going through rigors of waking up in the morning, rigors of braving the elements, rigors of stomaching and tolerating and enduring other students that can be problematic to them, teachers that can be problematic to them, or just that they don't want to be around. They're having to get around and do around people they would not want to be around, or do things they would not want to do. That's actually work, however you call that. But with that on the bus, I couldn't just get by just with authority, so I have to entertain the students. So sometimes I play games of like if we can recognize Teslas or muscle cars. They especially liked Teslas and muscle cars, but more so Teslas. They're not too big on like the old-fashioned stuff. They need that new stuff. But sometimes I would talk to them about like the trucks that we'd see on the road. And at one point I told them that, I had learned this from another school bus driver, is that some of your trucks, like your sturdy trucks, I think they have something called a Cummins motor. That's like that's like a high grade of motor that proliferates in like trucks, like pickup trucks. But I had a bus driver talk to me about how I actually had a redundancy on the radio one time where I was trying to express myself, but I think it was another problem where sometimes you appear too educated, for lack of a better word, or you appear entitled if you come off a little bit too bookish. That can be a problem in a lot of lines of work, including education itself, no less than radio communications. And so I'm not trying to get off into the weeds about what's appropriate or not for radio communications, what's concise, what's efficient, and therefore vital in radio communication. I'm not trying to belabor that, but just that you can be appreciated or not appreciated by being too bookish, whatever you do, however you're intending to come across. But I had communicated a very nuanced situation as it pertains to a failure in communication between a family, the dispatcher, and then myself with students on the bus. There's a failure in the preparation of the students that day, but also the communication once I recognized that there's a problem. But another colleague had appreciated the way that I handled myself on the radio, and he came to me in confidence and said that he appreciated how I went about that. And then he just got to talking about different stuff and some of the just about the industry, and he was saying that some of the buses, they're actually not very sturdy about getting up to highway speed, so they're somewhat limited, the actual engine of the bus, in that they're not made to accelerate very quickly. But to him, that could be a danger sometimes in certain traffic situations. And so he was saying that some of your actual trucks that have like these Cummins motor, there is about as powerful as what a school bus engine would have. I think the engine would be like diesel. I don't know if the Cummins engines are diesel also, but he's saying just in pound for pound torque, horsepower, some of these pickup trucks are as potent and powerful as an actual school bus engine. That might be a unique insight for someone, but I communicated that to the students. They're like, really? How much does one of those trucks cost? And I was just ballpark. Sometimes you just teach them about life just so they can have a reference for different things that's part of education. It's not just telling them, hey, this is exactly statistically what the going rate of a truck is now. No, you just give them a ballpark area figure, and then they can work with that as a reference for a lot of life. But they're saying, how much does one of those trucks cost? I was like, I think a new one would be like maybe 60,000. I didn't say that they can be up to 80,000, but I said about $60,000. $60,000, because they're thinking about like they might get $1 a week or like $5 a month for allowance, and they're trying to compute $60,000. How may someone come by $60,000? A teacher, anyone, so their parents, anyone. How may you actually afford $60,000? But that actually shows you that, because I'm there with them, and now the school bus drivers, they get compensated. The entire industry experienced a hike. Like I think around 2022 was my experience. There was at least like a $4 or $5 hike, almost the industry standard for school bus drivers to keep up with some of the competition of other professional driving jobs coming out of the pandemic. To incentivize people as school bus drivers. So I began exactly after the pandemic, but then a year later there was a hike, and so like me as a school bus driver, that's about as high of a pay grade as a person can find doing regular employment, for without some kind of degree or like special credential. That's actually pretty high compensation that I was having then, when I was supporting those students. So I could feasibly, if I was prudent, I could feasibly afford or get around to finagling financing a truck of some kind that would be worth $60,000. That I wasn't thinking like that or intending that then, but ostensibly I could do that as their driver. But there they are, not getting paid nothing. They get free lunch sometimes, but some of those lunches are nasty in school, if we're honest. They get lunch and the ability to be at school during daytime hours. Some of that's the broader mechanism, is that in our mass consumption society, there's a necessity for spending a lot, but also for working a lot, such that parents can't raise children the way that might be natural, like to be with their mother all day. So part of the actual mechanics of our economy forces children to be at school, whether that's for their best interest or not. They just must be somewhere, such as school, to make other things viable in the society for people to do their jobs. But they're actually not being compensated for that. So some people have said that there's a little bit of a discrepancy about like college athletes, where college athletes, they win finance for those schools hand over fist, vast swaths of wealth, that those schools are viable because of the contribution of collegiate athletics. But those athletes are not, maybe different now, but for a long time they haven't been compensated like that. And I used to think that some of the fighting between athletes, like on the field, like when they get frustrated, even maybe professional too, but when they get frustrated, I think it's because a lot of anger comes from injustice. So that they're frustrated, it's because they're actually being deprived and disenfranchised systematically on a broad scale. But rather than take that grievance upward, it's more natural and convenient and simple to express it side or down. So they're getting exactly angry. They're letting out their frustration with their peers or people that they would appreciate as less of stature. But it may be a deeper problem in that they're actually not being compensated for that manful, hard, rigorous, to be an understatement, labor that they're putting forward, energy that they're spending to entertain people, but also not being compensated. But it's similar with students, where they're not really being, it's pretty like when I was a young person, I got recruited for a class about giftedness when I was very young, and it amounted to me having a computer class. It was like when computers were new. I would be at a computer lab doing math problems on a dry boring screen with only like one color. It was like a blue background and like a faint blue text. I'd be doing these math problems on there that were I actually hadn't been trained for them. So like they're giving me math problems, but they actually weren't giving me the teaching in math to figure the problems out. So I'd be stuck there on a computer with a math problem, and it wasn't entirely difficult, but I actually just didn't get trained for it. I think there was something of a subsidy for that rec center, and also the teacher that recruited me to that, where they would actually get paid to have children on their hands, but they actually didn't take the time to teach the children the math that they were doing. So I'd be stuck with these math problems, but I actually hadn't got the teaching the training to do the math problems. But I got compensated at the end of that, like $30 at the end of a semester, and I exactly spent that on like rubber darts, and like I intended to spend that on like Nerf guns. So you get somebody money and they spend it on weaponry for their level. For me, it had been like Nerf guns and water guns, or remote control toy cars. So grown-ups are concerned with guns and cars. Little kids are concerned with toy cars and remote control cars. But to me, that was a hell of a lot of money though in the 90s for a child to have $30 like that. That's a lot of money now, but that's a hell of a lot of money then. And it felt well earned, like for me, like that, to actually get a paycheck. That might have been why I always kept a job as an adult, and I was employed as an adult, is because I had been in the experience and in the habit of receiving a paycheck even very young. That might actually be one of the real blessings of that, is that it taught me to work for and experience the sensation of receiving a paycheck, having worked for it as a young person. But that's not the experience of most children in school. They're not getting compensated for the work. So it actually almost like, so I felt like I was blowing, when they were asking me about those $60,000 with the trucks like that. I wasn't having $60,000 in my pocket at that time, but it was almost like I felt like I was blowing my cover, because it's like the gig is up. We're all working, so are you, but so are we. But you're getting compensated like this. We're not getting compensated for being on this bus, but you're getting compensated like this many dollars an hour, and you wouldn't get compensated like that if we weren't on the bus and doing all the things we have to do to wake up and go to school, to be on the bus, to give you a job. So I thought about that when they were asking about that question. But it's a deeper message. Most notion is that they're not compensated for their presence in school. But that I a little bit diverged with that. But what I wanted to say is that but a lot of people, so your Ivy League schools, they were more so to convey and hand off stature and entitlement, I think. And then the learning was secondary to that. That stature and entitlement was primary. I think that's still the case now. Higher education, stature and privilege and entitlement is the prime objective of higher education. Then from there, the different networking and opportunities from networking is the next consideration. Then the actual skills is a part of that, and you got them fighting tooth and nail in a rat race to ostensibly have the skill, but also the access to further venuing of entitlement and credentialing that will amount to different forms of privilege and overseership of the society, from the standpoint of having a better position, very similar to the older iteration. So some of the most formidable but also entitled people you may run across in broad society are people that have come from higher education. They may be some of the difficult people to deal with because they're that entitled, almost as like your nobility and gentry of the older iterations, like hundreds of years ago, such as like the East Coast, like with your some of the different things that would give people the means to pay for education on the East Coast back in the day. But still, you have some of your higher seats of education in that vicinity. Some of your really gifted people, talented people, will be interested in migrating to these institutions. And then also, so when you get around these institutions, you may actually run across some actual people that have some of the etiquette and mannerisms of real class going back. So when I was in a class for music, but it was like a virtual class, but we'd have a virtual class 1 hour a week where we actually got to meet our peers, and we were interfacing on the screen sharing like Zoom, but like not Zoom, but like that school had their own iteration of like facilitating a network group call conference. But the interesting thing is that when you arrive there to the class, some of the students will arrive earlier than others, and then also you'd have an opportunity to banter with and just small talk with the actual teacher. it was interesting because that'd be uncomfortable for some people, because how do I talk to someone that I respect? I need deference. I'm being judged by how I present myself, both by the teacher and other students, potentially a little bit combative. A teacher could penalize you if you're too frank and familiar with them, but also your peers would likely punish you and ostracize you more and harder than your teacher, even if they were to appreciate you as being too frank and formal, or just even spending too many words around a teacher. A lot of that, you have that going on in any situation with like fawning over a learned person, a court of some kind, but also up to and including education and the modern iteration of group conferencing. But there was one student in the class. He was actually just spending a little bit of time at that school, and then he was getting back to actually Harvard. He was, and I don't mean to be, I didn't mean to sound I didn't mean to sound smug like that, to actually Harvard, but he was really going to Harvard. And so most people have had ideas about what's a good school and what's not, but among names, just for the sake of names, Harvard carries weight for a lot of people, and that might actually be what they go there for. But it's also maybe difficult to get the opportunity to get credentialed by them and associated with them, as they probably would make it difficult, and that's some of the prestige. But there's a movie called Accepted in the early 2000s about matriculation to college, and they humorously made that point that the exclusivity is some of what gives the prestige of these schools. And there's some themes about what it actually is to be at higher education and what that's meant then and now that you can see in that film Accepted. One of the best parts of that film Accepted is that these two boys they're just exactly becoming college age, but one of them came from a family that had a tradition at this school, especially like with some of the fraternal society and like being hazed like that. So this child, it's actually Jonah Hill is the one that played that's one of his earlier works, Jonah Hill. And he was actually showing you artistically and comically the mentality of wanting to matriculate and succeed at some of these schools, especially like some of the fraternal organizations. And he was exactly ready to get effaced, to get humiliated. But the other ones that were humiliating him, but they actually weren't accepting him the same way they were humiliating him harder than themselves. So they were outcasting him even while humiliating him and giving him access into this thing, but he was damn near ready to sell his soul to be in there. And that might be actually what the experience of selling a person's soul is, to want to be accepted by that which does not want to accept you, to work harder for that, then maybe actually be accepted, then leverage that acceptance against other marginal people, such as his friend in that film, potentially, is what's really selling your soul or effacing yourself. Selling your face might be as bad as selling your soul. But his friend was like, man, me and you go back all the way to kindergarten, man. I don't know what this tradition stuff you're talking about. That's the only tradition I know. That's the only tradition I give a damn about is what we had been, our friendship. That's the only tradition. That's tradition. That's a dope thing he said right there. And that really cheered me of someone, because when I was coming up back in the day, it seemed cool to go to these schools, but then also the prestige of these schools seemed cool. I wasn't all on board with the fraternal stuff because I was never like that much of a team player to be about something like that. But that really was a lesson there, is that friendship, love, that's the real brotherhood, fraternity, for lack of a better word, is just simple friendship, simple love. That's the greatest thing, not all that other fancy, ornate, secretive stuff. It's just the simple stuff. But that film, it also showed that the prestige comes from denying people of these schools. But then I actually met a person that was in class, and he was actually about to transition from that school, an actual eminent school about music, to Harvard. I think he was going to study psychology there. But it was very interesting around him where when we would be in these forums, these landing zones of a group chat, he was comfortable talking about the weather, the price of tea in China, the green grass, anything that would come into his mind. He was comfortable talking about that and interested to talk about that. That's actually so he was a Harvard man. That was a Harvard man. So most people in life, they're preoccupied with shut-upness, with money making, with efficiency, with business. But what would it be like to meet a Harvard man, the boss of those people? What would it be like to meet the boss? Man, yeah, man, we're gonna get around to all this we're gonna get around to all this silly stuff at some. And he was actually the best student in the class. He mastered that material quickly. He was earnest about that, but he wasn't all eager, that is greedy, to jump to business. Because a lot of people, that's actually a designation of class, is that people with class, yes, they want to succeed. Yes, the success matters, but they also have other things going on. It's not all about the money. I might sound bogus saying that, but it's not straight to business with people that have class. They want to smoke a cigar with you. They want to fill you out. They want to play around the golf with you. They want to actually exist together with you. And that being a person, life is, for people with actual stature and standing and privilege, life is important first, then money, then the other stuff. But life is important. That's what we lost by some people. That we could say that being proletariat so long, we actually forgot something of living, where we think that money is important, work is important, business is important more than life. That's actually the standpoint of the proletariat, because that's what we've been beaten down with. But so much that we forget to live, we forget to enjoy the weekend, stuff like that. But people having privilege and standing and actually finance success, they're the opposite of that. They're actually concerned with living first. So you meet people that, how do you know the actual designation of class? People with class, they're concerned with life, with family, living, the weekend, hobbies, enjoyment, sports, watching sports, enjoying sports, family, barbecue, cookout, biking, lovemaking, stuff like that. But a lot of us, we're just all about money. Even people of white collar, blue collar, and maybe criminal too, we're concerned with money, then life. But that's actually a lower expression of class. It can be appreciated. I'm not saying it's good or bad we have to do what we have to do, and we're not getting any favors or shortcuts if we come up short on money. But I'm just saying that to actually meet a person, a person of class that at least has learning, but also proximity to class, like being accepted at Harvard. That's where I actually learned what it is to be comfortable with life, and like small talk and stuff like that, and expressing ourselves first as people first. Then, so he was comfortable with any degree of small talk. He didn't get uncomfortable by small talk, and he was actually smooth like that. I wouldn't want someone like, if it was down to it, that's not the kind of person you would want around, like your significant other. Not only because he's learned and like successful, but just because he's simple, being a person and talking about what comes into his mind. That's the best standpoint of small talk, is what actually is coming into your mind, because that's your real interaction. But a lot of people are so eager and hungry to get down to business. They're almost like it's kind of like, so you got a dog, right? You got a dog and a man. There's some food right there. Now, a lot of us, if you're hungry enough, that food is going to draw your attention, even a man. But for a dog, they can't take their mind off that food. They got to eat right now. But a lot of us are like that about business. We got to get down to business right now. Hi, I'm straight to business. But what is business without living? What is life then? So I just learned that I was appreciating that. I think some of that rubbed off on me around him, is that I got more comfortable expressing what comes into my mind in small talk, but also in communication in general. And sometimes that'll actually get me outed from an opportunity, because they were expecting me to be more greedy about getting down to business. And since I'm that open, whether from technical or just engaging people, that would actually speak to something of being learned. And that doesn't jive well in some professions, especially where they're getting over on people. It's not. They say that education doesn't make for good subjection. But I can't. I'm not trying to say like education is better or worse, but just sometimes that's actually an example of class that it may rub off. So when we're having access to these different learning venues and rubbing elbows with people of different stratified class, some of that can rub off on us, but it may not actually serve us, because now you're having actual demeanor, mannerisms, comfort of expressing yourself that'd be from being around class, people with class. But you get to a blue collar opportunity that actually pays well, better than a lot of opportunities that would come from an educational title. But that actual class, it's not what people are looking for. So there can be ambivalence around class. That's all I'm wanting to say. But it amounts to an ambivalence of compatibility, both in technology, but users of technology.